in England were making the rules complicated and confusing. First, students must throw up on their parents and their grandparents, and if you don't, you will be arrested. Second, I also want to see 2 big flying horses. Third, wash your nose on Mondays, please. Fourthly, if you smell meat, you must take a pregnancy test, and anyone breaking the rules risks being dispersed to Germany and Spain. Thank you.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right, this is JP and Julie. We are doing Book of Hours while we are traveling back from our secret destination.
Right. This is Bookmark, the Turnpike edition.
Right. So pardon the sunglasses, but it's early and it's bright.
Yeah.
So,
we're somewhere in the state of Pennsylvania right now.
right. Appropriately social distancing and all those things.
Yeah. Although I'm not going to wear a mask while I'm driving. I'm sorry. I'm just
No,
not.
that would be putting everybody at risk.
Yeah.
We think that wearing a mask while you drive is...
Probably one of the stupidest things in the world.
I would imagine so, because your oxygen flow is inhibited. I know that when I put on a mask, I can't see very well, and I end up tripping over everything. And it's, it's no good.
Yeah.
But we're not here to once again talk about the mask issue.
No.
I suppose the big elephant in the room is...
the president.
Right. So Donald Trump was taken to the hospital for COVID and was put on remdesivir and oxygen. And
So personally, I feel like this is just a story that he wasn't taken to Walter Reed and he wasn't put on remdesivir or whatever. They're just saying that he was. They're just saying that he had COVID. This is all just a political theater.
right.
I honestly, I don't feel like that's the case. I mean, one of our Pennsylvania senators, what are they? Representatives, state representatives, also so-called came down with COVID. And what I was saying to Julie about that is that I think, that this is put on that person, right? So, they're put into a place where they can't deny it, and if they do,
It's political suicide.
It's political suicide if
Right.
they do, and so they're put in a position where they're forced to go along with the whole thing. And so he had to come out and say, yes, I'm going to. Oh, interesting. Somebody wrote freedom on a rock over here.
Mm-hmm.
He's forced to say, yes, I'm in quarantine for the next 14 days or whatever the fuck.
And he's following all the appropriate protocols.
Right.
And this is a representative that's been pretty vocal about it being a hoax.
Yeah. Yeah. So they basically forced him into, this situation. And I think with Trump, Julie's been talking about an October surprise. You can go into that in a second, but I just want to finish my thought here about
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no problem.
I think with the Trump situation, they put him into this position, and because they wanted this narrative to go along with, Donald Trump has COVID because he didn't follow the correct protocols, because that's what we're seeing in liberal tweets and blue check tweets that are coming from liberal sources, and that's what they want that narrative to be, right? So whoever's running the media narrative, that's what they want it to be, and that's what they're doing. And so somehow they coerced the situation. I don't even want to say they coerced Trump. I think they coerced the situation, or set up a situation in which this is just the case, and he's going along with it. He is, whether he feels coerced or not. I think he's okay with it personally, but that's me.
I mean, there's no, these people that lionize your politicians and hero worship other people, again, I think we go back to that same conversation that we've had many times over the last few months, which is that, the United States is really immature. And we're really infantilized psychologically, and we lift up our parents and our grandparents like they're these,
they're heroes.
They're the heroes, and we don't know how to say goodbye to people that hurt us. And we believe that politicians have their, our best interest at heart when they don't. When a politician tells you, especially someone like Trump, who's already dealing with his own issues with, never being good enough for his father, that's a whole different, psychological take on the man. I don't think he's as narcissistic as the liberals would have you believe. I think that's a narrative that was created. I think we're talking about somebody who's incredibly, has a real fragile ego and has self-esteem issues. And he just, he's always wanted to be a part of the Vanderbilt set. And he was never accepted because he's not Harvard
right. He was
stock.
And he was new money, and he came up from
right. So that's why so many people could identify with him, because none of us are born into a meritocracy. Most of us are born into a situation where we're constantly struggling, and so he really promoted this idea about himself that he was sort of like the everyman, kind of like Bernie Sanders did. But honestly, like, after JP was saying, like, after Trump did the show, The Apprentice,
right.
I think he learned a lot of the tactics and a lot of the strategies that come with the media, and also come with being on TV.
Right. So I'm calling him post-media Trump.
Right. So post-media Trump is different from the Trump that was before the show on The Apprentice. Like, a lot of stuff that I see him doing, I had enough theater classes. I have a theater background, like a little bit of a theater background. Like, anybody can see that this is all theater.
Right.
Like, you can really see it. There's no legitimacy there. But before The Apprentice, he was nailing it. He was talking about,
We heard an interview with him, just right after 9/11 occurred.
Right.
And he was talking about how those buildings could not have come down the way they did, from an airplane strike.
Right. And that really appealed to a lot of people, especially the physics community. You'd have to defy the laws of physics in order to believe the official NIST report. And that's the kind of language that Trump was using. He was being really intelligent about, what's involved with the engineering and what's involved with these towers coming down. And that's why so many people, when they discovered he was running for president, why they voted for him. Not to mention the whole antics about, being for the little guy and all that stuff, But I think what we're witnessing here is the United States is incapable. Many in the United States are incapable of looking within to find that strength. This is why you don't have anybody coming out to protest or to speak out against all of this tyranny and all of these anti-constitutional agendas and mandates and suggestions. They're not even law. Why you don't have anybody really speaking out against it is because citizens in the United States are just expecting someone else to do all the work, and they think, well, I voted, so the person I voted for will fight it for me.
Right.
Meanwhile, the politicians who aren't aware of global initiatives and aren't aware of the foreign intervention that is taking place in your local government bodies, not just like federally but statewide, they're not aware, and so they're waiting for the people to start coming out and protesting. So it's like nobody's really communicating effectively. It's like a bad relationship, sometimes, like JP this morning, he left his keys somewhere, and I watched him put his keys somewhere that are really like, why would you do that? But instead of saying something, I just sort of was like, well, he must have done it for a reason, and he has his reasons, and I'm not going to say anything. Turns out by not saying something, I really I should have said something, and he would have been like, oh yeah, that's not what I wanted to do. So you need to communicate with your with your state reps, and you need to communicate with your state senators and say, why are these laws taking place and all this.
Well, that is if you put so much. Okay, let's look at it this way. If you put so much emphasis and energy into representative democracy, then you need to follow through and talk to these people.
Right.
Because we don't believe in that. Yeah, we're still talking to some of these people.
Right.
Right. We're still tweeting them. We're still contacting them, even if they're not our representative. There's somebody that may have our interest in mind,
right,
and they need some sort of support. We still talk to them, but we don't put our energy into electoral politics and representative democracy. But if you're going to do that, if you're going to put your energy into that, then you need to follow through. They cannot just do it alone. They're going to need you to support them or tell them what to do.
Yeah.
But, and we're going to get into something else. Julie wants to talk about something else in these regards because of the lack of protest and but we'll get there in a little bit.
Well, I guess that's what I'm trying to say is, we're really infantilized, and I'm just really kind of, I don't know. I mean, compared to other countries, we're really just acting like infants. The other countries are coming out and protesting by the hundreds of thousands. Berlin came out in August to the tune of 1 million people.
Well, here's something that's interesting. In our last video that we posted, we featured some protests at the end of the video. Mm-hmm. And one of them was in Belgrade,
Serbia,
where we've been seeing photos of Belgrade, Serbia,
right,
from a journalist, Eva Bartlett, who's been posting these things, and it
like living there now.
It looks relatively free, and
it looks wonderful,
and yet there are mask laws or mask rules and things like that. So because that's what the protest was about, or at least that's what the banner said,
right?
In the video that we featured. So clearly it's a worldwide thing, but this is a country that experienced a massive civil war, 30 years ago, and they now are like, no, we're not putting up with this
doing
bullshit,
this. Yeah, we're not putting up with
but,
this.
You'd think that they would still be under the trauma of a civil war. That was a pretty serious war that took place in that region.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd think that they would still be, very traumatized from all that. And yet they have enough strength within their society to come out and say, no, we're not going to do this.
Right.
What's our excuse?
Yeah, well, our excuse is that, we're incredibly selfish,
I think it, again, goes back to this reliance on the type of government and, that we have, where people rely on representative democracy, their representatives, to do the work for them. And then this whole hero worshipping bullshit that comes into play, where it's like, I'm just a lowly little person. I need a hero to save me. And so, you get this hero worshipping applied to politics, and you vote for these people, and you go, yeah, I'm behind you all the way, and then they don't do what you want, and then you get disappointed, but you don't do anything beyond that. And so It's really very frustrating, and it's easy to say, oh, well, there's just a lot of money in politics, which there are, but at the same time, you have to hold these people to account.
But this isn't really about, lecturing people what to do, I would say in a perfect world, if we were living in a very woke society and we weren't so easily manipulated by, how we're supposed to feel, we're told by the media and by our politicians how we're supposed to feel. If we were able to acknowledge our own feelings and our own thoughts and our own belief systems about things, then this is probably where we would be. We would be in Philadelphia right now, because my belief is that we should be protesting to the tune of 1 million Americans in the city of Philadelphia, because that's where the United States Constitution was penned, That's where the Declaration of Independence was penned. And also Philadelphia is called the city of brotherly love. And a lot of this that I'm hearing and seeing and witnessing and feeling in general is this idea that people are coming together. Hearts and minds are starting to draw together, and the good goes with the good and the like goes with the like. So it feels like the city of brotherly love in Philadelphia is the appropriate city to descend upon. It just feels like that, rather than going and protesting on Washington D.C., which is what Martin Luther King did, or going to New York, which sometimes is a focal point because it's the center of commerce. I think Philadelphia this time around is the city that 1 million people should descend upon Philadelphia and protest what's happening to our country. Because as we discussed in our latest video, Deconstruction, is you've got foreign powers and foreign influences and interventions that are disrupting your local legislative bodies, like your governments and your governors are not acting on behalf of the people. They're acting on behalf of corporations. They're acting on behalf of government bodies that are in service to global initiatives. And all of this has to do with surveillance, biofascism, techno-fascism, a complete eradication of the human experience. And this is globally. And this is stuff that everybody knows. We've all talked about it ad nauseum. And the reason I also think that Philadelphia would be an appropriate city for 1 million Americans to descend upon is because of Alison McDowell. She's from Philadelphia, and she's the foremost expert. She said that there are three identifying parts of society that this will affect. Number 1 is education. Number 2 is housing. And number 3, I think she said, is the medical industry.
Yeah.
So it's education and housing and the medical industry that they're going to be targeting in order to initiate more anti-life involvement.
All these areas will be tied into financialization of people and investment in human capital through these industries and these areas. So your health, what we're being pushed into right now, and we're going through this right now through all these various initiatives, the masking and the self isolation and the distancing and there was a vulture on the side of the road eating something. What feeds into this sort of like idea now that people are taking? Well, it's like, you are responsible for my health and I'm responsible for your health by wearing a mask, but then it's going to be, it's going to eventually work its way into being you're responsible for your own health. And that's already starting to happen. I'm starting to feel that push towards that area, where it's like, if you cough or sneeze in public, people look at you really weird and really funny, and people are really paranoid about being around each other. And so now you're gonna, and also with the closure of like these medical facilities for just, they only bring in COVID people, as opposed to people who need actual medical care. We're going to have to start, taking care of our own medical needs, and again, that will come through. We'll be monitored for our own health through wearable devices and things like that, and all that stuff will feed into the social impact investing and the human capital markets that will be money based on our healthcare. So it's really messed up how they're exploiting our own humanity to make money for themselves.
Right. So, some people really just don't understand. I mean, I've received messages, personal messages, and I've seen comments in general where people don't understand what the term human capital means. Human capital basically means, it means slavery. So, think of slaves. Okay, so slaves were captured against their will, and then they were put on an auction block. Human beings were put on an auction block, and then rich men would buy the slave, and then the slave would go work the field to make the rich men even richer, and the slave got no they didn't get paid for the work that they produced. They didn't get paid for their labor, and they were beaten down, to make themselves believe that they were really nothing more than just, a machine or an animal that worked for the slave
Right.
master.
Well,
So this is anti-life, anti-human.
absolutely.
Okay, so this is what we're going through right
and
now.
then let's look at like just capital as in general, like what capital is. Capital is not money. Capital is something that makes you money.
Right.
So if you own a lawn care and landscaping business, the tools that you have, they are your capital investments. They are the things that you use to make your money with. So lawn mowers and shovels and rakes and whatever other tools that you use. Those are the things that you use to make your money. And so those are your capital investments. Now, as Julie was saying, slaves are human capital investments. So they would buy people in order to make them money, right? So they were chattel, right? So they were not cattle, they were not animals, they were chattel. They were people who were used as tools or machinery to make money.
Instead of buying a tractor to go till the land, they bought a human being to go till the land.
So now in the future, they're not going to need people to do those things again. They have robots and artificial intelligence to take care of all the heavy lifting, right? What they're going to be using us for are, very abstract investment products in order to make money on investments that they create in order to, get a return on that investment.
Right. That's why you hear these rumors about, like, in the school system, you hear these rumors that all American history subjects will be wiped from a child's curriculum. And if you watch Lifelong Learning, it should have, that we did, where we blew the whistle on what's happening in the, in the educational industry, the for-profit educational industry, and it's all across the board, from homeschooling all the way up to private schools or public schools. You can't get away from it. Basically, what's going on is a child is going to get badges, and the badges will tell him if he's a good obedient child who listens or not. And the more badges he gets, then he can move on into the next level. This isn't like the grading scale that you're used to.
It comes down to they complete a program. Like, so it's what Allison calls it is I did this,
right?
And it's gamification. So I did this thing, and now I get a badge for completing that. But the badge also includes some information like how well I did, how well the teacher did, and maybe some other information that goes along with that, and then that gets stored into a blockchain ledger.
Right. So what you want to think about is, what does this kind of thing that a little kid who's maybe starting out at like 5, 6, 7 years old, being indoctrinated into this process or this way of learning in school, so-called learning in school, what do you think that's going to do for them as they transition into high school and then into so-called college? What it really is just teaching them that they constantly need to get to the next level and that they're never really good enough. Like, you can never really see an end in sight. And that is where the financialization comes in. So say they start their first job, in a tech firm or whatever at age, say, 20. Their manager will come to them and say, if you want to get to the next level, then you need to take these classes. But these classes are $2,500. But luckily, you have an investor. You have somebody that wants to invest in you, wants to see you succeed. So that investor is going to cover the cost of your classes. And what we'll do is we'll just take the money out of your paycheck and then give it to the investor to pay them back. And of course, there's going to be finance charges and all sorts of things. So $2,500 could easily turn into, it's like a credit card. It could easily turn into $3,500 or $5,000 if it's not paid back in a certain amount of time. So what you have is an individual being told that if they want to get anywhere in life, they're going to need to continue to take the classes in order to get to that next level. So they're going to scramble and chase after that little carrot that's constantly dangled in front of them, which they're never going to reach. So you have people working essentially to pay off debt for a possible job opportunity that will never ever manifest. It will never. They'll never see it.
Well,
this is called financialization of human beings.
Right.
This is where you generate.
Right, and it's the lifelong learning, right?
Right.
So you're always having to learn. In some cases, you will get that job and it will pay off, but you'll never be able to really make very much money or get very far with that.
Right. You'll wonder why it is that you've achieved the level that you were told you needed to achieve to be a success, and you'll wonder why your take home is only, $150 a week. And you're struggling. Right. You'll always be struggling, and this is really insidious because, this is what we're talking about when we say the financialization of human beings, or using human beings as capital. And in order to fight this, you've either got to fall off the system completely, remove yourself from these really anti-human and anti-life scenarios that are very predatory, okay? Remove yourself completely from them, or fight it. Go to Philadelphia. 1 million of you descend on Philadelphia, and I would say the first governor that needs to be ousted, because he's promoting all of these anti-life legislations and scenarios, and he's working in service to foreign governments and corporations, okay, or foreign institutions. They're not necessarily governments, but they're investors. Okay, he's working in service to them, not to the people who elected him. So the first thing you need to do is get him out of there. And the people are going to have to be the ones to remove him. It's going to you can't count on a judge to make a ruling, and you can't count on, everything been co-opted. There's nothing left. There's nothing left for you to, your own president is even committing, is even play acting out the fraud. So, where's the disconnect? So you need human beings who want to maintain their autonomous selves and maintain their freedom and sovereignty and decisions on how they want to run their life, and they don't want to be human capital markets, and they don't want to be enslaved to a constant, or they don't want to see their children enslaved to a constant never-ending circle of debt and servitude, being lied to their whole life. And this goes back to what I said at the very beginning, is we believe the lie. Why do we believe the lies? Your parents lie to you all the time. You know that, right? Your parents grow up, and the first thing they tell you is the big lie. They tell you, well, you can do anything you want because you're an American and you live in this awesome country. You can have and be anything you want. The world is at your fingertips. That's the first big lie. That's the big lie. And you believe it, and you absorb it, and then you never get anywhere, and you wonder why.
Well, you blame yourself.
And then you blame yourself. And the fact is that if you're not born into that meritocracy or those opportunities, if your last name isn't Rockefeller or Vanderbilt or whatever, then you're not going to have that. But you believe that you do it. So we're really infantilized, and we're really not getting it. We're really, really not getting it. It's really frustrating. But other countries get it, and they've been coming out, every Saturday they come out and fight, and the crowds are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the pressure is being applied on their governments to stop this.
Well,
Yeah,
absolutely.
It needs to stop.
And then there's the other thing that you were talking about, Julie, and I'd like to get into that as well. And that is the idea that we talk about falling off the system, and that's really going to require walking away. And we mentioned this in our latest video, and that's going to require a lot of work, and you have to be committed to that. to where it's like, no, I'm not going to be part of your system anymore. I'm giving up my ability. They're going to force us, actually. What we're seeing, what we think is going to start happening is with all the requirements that are going to continue going along. I'm going to have to go back up a hair. We were talking about Trump and this whole thing. I feel like what they're trying to do is set up a scenario to where all these mandates that the governors have been creating for masking up and all the rituals you go through in restaurants and all that crap, that they're trying to create a scenario or a situation where they're going to create national mandates for masking and social distancing, and it's going to get to the point where it's like, if you don't get the app on your phone, if you don't get the COVID pass, if you don't get the whatever it is required of you, then you will not be allowed to participate in society.
You can't go to the grocery store. You can't go to restaurants.
Right, and you can't go to concerts and museums.
Right, so that's why Trump is, placating to, their government's been occupied. It's been occupied by central banks, and it's also been occupied by technocrats.
Right.
Okay. So, you can't think. I mean.
So then, going back to my thoughts before I backed up a bit, is that we're all going to have to start creating alternative societies and alternatives to what's going on there. Okay, I can't go to your grocery store.
Oh, well.
I can't go to your concert venue. I can't go to do these things. Then I'm going to have to do something with my neighbors. I am going to have to create new means of production of food, or create new ways of getting along and surviving, and not just surviving but thriving, and creating your own concerts and creating your own ways of getting food, and your own ways of your own networks. And something that Julie and I experience all the time, and we experienced it this weekend. I meant to tell you earlier, Julie, but I'm going to mention this. We were in this place where you can see generations of social ties and family ties and social ties, generations of them, and you can see how it works, where there's these lovely places where people live, and it's a lovely community, and all these kinds of things. The converse exists as well. It's like you can have a poor community with the same kind of social ties and generations of family ties and things like that. But it's nicer to see in a nicer community. But what I'm getting at is that, we have never really had that. We have never had the strong social ties that a lot of people, even in San Francisco, had, who were, generationally, family had been in San Francisco for generations. Julie and I never really had that. We don't have that now in the place we live now. And we've never had it because of a variety of circumstances. My grandparents were just like, they had itchy feet. They just moved around a lot, and our family ended up getting spread around the whole country as a result. But what I'm getting at is that these familiar and traditional social ties are going to start going away. They're going to be broken up because of this whole thing with the COVID, post-COVID world. And so we're now going to have to start taking those ideas and saying goodbye and creating new ones.
Right. So on a personal note, so basically taking what he said and using like a personal example, there are lots and lots and lots of people that email us and reach out to us personally saying, I went to this event with my entire family and they think differently than I do. And some of my family members, someone else said their family members have like disconnected with them altogether. So you're seeing, I hate to sound biblical, but growing up Christian, or non-denominational, one of the things I learned was that, sort of like during the quote end times, brother and father will go against each other, mother and daughter will split apart, and you'll see a splintering of society and a splintering of families, where everything's going to be falling apart. And my response to that is, okay, well, big deal. Why would you want to be around people that want to hurt you? So find new family, whatever. It's like we have, friends that can't speak to their own family and their own groups of people. You know, you got this American thing where it's like, well, this person is my best friend because I've known them since 3rd grade and I've known them for 30 years. And it's like, yeah, but would they pay your rent? Would they stand with you when you can't wear a mask? Will they stand with you if you say, I'm not going to get the COVID pass or the injection or the jab or whatever? No, because they're not really your friend. You're just because you've known them your whole life doesn't mean that they're your friend. Give me a break. You know, you want to go for the like goes with the like. The good goes with the good. And a lot of people are having a hard time sort of like letting go of their biological family. I don't know.
Or their long-term
or their long-term so-called friendships. And
Right.
It's like, you know, JP's still in contact with people he's known since he was, you know,
in kindergarten. There's
in
people on my
kindergarten.
Facebook.
And it's like,
But
who the fuck are these people?
The
They're
thing
like-
is if I didn't have Facebook, I wouldn't think of them
Right,
at all.
you wouldn't think about them if you
Right.
didn't have social media to
Right.
like remind you that unfortunately they're out there. But they're just going to do their thing and they're just going to be busy trying to play doctor and fuck over society while you are going to, you know, the like goes with the like, the good goes with the good, and you're going to find those people, and those are the new societies that are going to be forming and created, and new families and new connections. And that's all we're saying is that, you know, just because the one part of society says, well, you know, if you don't engage in this process, which is anti-life and anti-human, if you don't engage in this process, then we're going to take away your human experience. You can't buy food, you can't, you know, go do things, you can't whatever. It's like, oh, well, you know, I don't need you. Okay, so just create a new society that is based on a whole new parameters, you know. It doesn't have to be based on these anti-life initiatives. And a lot of people are living in this bizarre world of fear where they think that jackbooted thugs, you know, driving tanks are going to come down your road and kidnap your kids and knock on your door and break your door down and beat the hell up, beat you up for not wearing a mask or something. Those are videos that you see on Facebook and those videos that you see on Twitter or media or whatever. Those are scare tactics. I don't believe that they are 100% authentic.
No, I don't either.
There may be some authenticity to a few of them here and there.
Yeah.
But that's not the way that sustainable development models and these anti-life initiatives work. That's not how it works.
Well, let me bring up that video that was going around about the woman who was arrested in Ohio for not wearing a mask at a ball game.
At a ball game, right.
Now, I believe that was a real thing. However, I also don't believe that we would not have seen it if it had not been allowed to get out and sent around, you know, to everywhere, because they do squelch things. They do, you know, prevent content from getting around everywhere. But if they want the narrative to go out there, like say Facebook, for instance, or Twitter, they will allow that video and that information to be, distributed. At will, and as much as possible, and even possibly promote it even further, right? So these are things they may happen, but they're also allowing them to be distributed widely so that it scares people even more.
Right, because we're so easily fear-mongered and we're so easily terrorized. I mean, this is part of regime change operations and color revolutions.
That one thing that we saw from Australia about a month or two ago, where that girl was being beaten up by the police and somebody was recording it from down below, from above, and then there was somebody like nearby who was recording it.
Yes, the guy had her by the neck.
Right, she was like doing the I can't breathe. Yeah, that thing. Right, and she was a woman of color. Was
she?
Yeah, I think so.
No, I don't think so.
Well, yeah, she might have been Aboriginal. I don't know, but the point is that, you know, this thing was going on, and I do not believe that was an actual event. I think that was staged.
That's totally staged.
You know, so we get these things that are staged in some cases, and we get some things that are probably legitimate in some cases. In both cases, though, they get promoted and they get distributed because they're allowed to. They are not squelched. Whereas, like, content that we create or that other people that we know create tends to get less hits or less distribution because the algorithms that exist don't allow it to get out there as often.
Right. So why is it that our work, which is incredibly, we're being really rational. We're not being reactionary. We're being rational because we understand about, corporate influence in our government, and that we're living in public-private partnerships, which is fascism. And we're talking in these very matter-of-fact terms, and we create these video essays which have music and art and imagery in order to capture your attention and help you to process this information. Because if we just tried to teach you or tried to explain it to you like we were school teachers or whatever, that's not how we work. We use artistic interpretation in order to make the content for you. So why is it that we're being perfectly rational, perfectly logical, and yet we're not really getting the hits, whereas you see all of these crazy, irrational, anxiety-making videos, which should be squelched, because what's happening is society is losing its mind over these things. You're literally you're having nightmares, you can't function, it's way too anxiety-making. A human being does not have the capacity to manage and control this level of anxiety and fear constantly thrown at them every day, but yet those videos are, getting 1 million hits.
Right. Well,
so the rational response to things gets squelched, and the thing that makes society, want to crawl in the corner and suck its thumb and not do anything to help itself is what's getting 1 million hits.
Right. And I think that, we've answered our question, and there's two ways of looking at it, and I'm just going to review those. And one is that, people, on one hand, it's the audience, right? People respond better to crazy shit that's out there because they like to get scared, and we're all used to, the bad news that comes through the television news, right? Good news, everyone. The television has bad news,
right?
And it's like, if it bleeds, it leads, and if it's, so people are trained to respond and to, tune in to really horrible shit that they see on the screen.
Right.
Then the other side of that is again, it's the algorithms that we were talking about.
Sure,
how social media does squelch content that may be true to the fact or not. I hate using the word truth because that all depends on your own personal belief system. But what
there's
I would
no
like
truth.
But it's just factual and more rational explanations of things that maybe getting closer to what's actually going on tend to get squelched and held back.
Right.
We are getting a lot more traction than we used to, but it's
thanks to people.
Right. Thank you. Thanks to a lot of you out there sharing our work and helping us out with that. It does require us to do a lot of marketing as well. Well, primarily Julie does that, and so. We're thankful for the followers that we do have, who are helping us get the word out, but it's also taking a lot of work to get out there, as opposed to these videos that just get released and all of a sudden they got 3 million hits.
Right, exactly.
So it's frustrating. It
is really frustrating. Going back to the Donald Trump and everything, there's a couple of different things going on. So first of all, COVID-19 is a tool that's being used to ingratiate us or initiate us into anti-life scenarios, like using our biodata, which is our temperature and everything about us, for investors to make money at. Okay, that's where the human capital comes in as well, in the medical industry. So you're basically being used like a slave for someone else to make money. And if you have questions about this, you should probably talk to people in the disability community, because the disability community has been treated like this for decades. So, people are really upset about how, insurance companies and programs within hospitals could make lots and lots of money on your biodata, like your temperature and all this. It's like, oh, well, the disability community has been treated like a slave forever. Yeah, so why don't you talk to people?
You had an experience right before COVID happened.
Right, I did. They took my antibodies and they took my biodata, and who knows what they're doing with it.
But they had her sign papers.
They had me sign papers and everything. Yeah, it was really creepy. But the thing is So you've got Donald Trump, who's like, oh, guess what? I have, COVID-19. I have something that basically doesn't exist. And so they throw him into a resort and hide him away for a couple of weeks and make him do one of those, videos where he looks like he's being coerced into saying things, and what it does is it bumps up his base. His base gets really excited and says, oh, I'm going to vote for him because, I believe in him, and oh my gosh, he's sick and I love him and everything like that. So that's political manipulation, okay? And then you have him taking remdesivir, which their stocks are going to go up. What else? It gives
well, and then it plays into that scenario I was talking about before. So on the other side, the Dem side, they get to say, oh, well, see how, because he was irresponsible and didn't follow the protocols and didn't wear a mask and all this stuff, he got sick, right? So it plays into that as well.
Right, so they're going to nationalize. The goal is to nationalize, turn this into a police state nationally, and what better person to do that than, the cop herself, Kamala. So, they're going to nationalize the mask requirement using, and he's part of it. Whether he's doing it consciously or whether he's being coerced into doing it, it doesn't matter. He's doing it. So, don't hero worship the dude. Don't do that,
It's funny.
It's really dangerous.
Along those same lines, we're driving through Trump country. They're in the little towns and villages. You'll see the Democrat signs, but outside of those areas and along the roadside, you see nothing but Trump signs. And we saw one where it was like this giant sign outside of a very large house, and it said Trump.
A McMansion.
It would look like a mansion, right?
McMansion.
A McMansion, yeah, it was a McMansion.
It looked like a McMansion.
Yeah, it said Trump, a true American. And it was like, wow, and they paid for that sign. That wasn't handwritten. That was that was a big sign, and it wasn't an official sign either. It was orange.
Right.
Orange of all colors, right?
That's funny. Right.
I think that was done unconsciously, but
yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, it was funny. But so, and what I was saying to Julie is it's like, well, see, that's the opposite of the people we used to live around in San Francisco, who are, nothing but Biden Harris, and they're vehemently, mask and social distancing and all that bullshit. They're pushing that crap, whereas this is the opposite person, and both sides are just equally guilty for the situation that we're in.
Right. This is class war. If you notice, like, the real bougie, boutique-y neighborhoods and cities and towns are just really fascist about the mask and social distancing. But when you get into more sort of rural areas, like, we stopped off at a farm stand and run by the Amish. They weren't wearing masks. They're like, are you kidding? We don't even participate in your stupid society. We have our horse and buggies. We have our farms. Fuck off.
Right.
So, there's no mask. So, but you get into these really super high-end boutique-y neighborhoods like you would see in Carmel, or you would see in, some neighborhoods in Pittsburgh. Well, there's nothing really high-end about Pittsburgh at all, but some neighborhoods, like maybe in New York or San Francisco, are really...
Well, and even the small towns, too.
So, I mean, it's just like, this is obviously class war. These people with money are promoting fascism, as they always do, which is warfare against those who don't have money. That's just the way it goes. I mean, this is class war.
So, explain that, because you were talking about, like, say, like restaurants and hotels and things of that nature when we were there. So, when we were in the town that we were visiting, the restaurants have these beautiful interiors, but for the most part, you really can't go in.
Oh, right.
But they have outdoor seating.
Right.
These tents, they're getting ready for winter now.
Yeah, and you see it all over Pittsburgh, too, and I'm sure you've seen it. Well, and Peggy Hall mentioned seeing it in Orange County, and I'm sure it's in San Francisco as well, where the restaurant, you can't go into the restaurant anymore. But what they're doing is they're setting up, like, COVID-approved tents, so that if you do want to go have a meal and go dining, we're going to go into a tunnel in a minute, so it's going to get dark. So if you do want to go in and dine, then you have to sit in this tent. All right, so what's happening is the restaurant is doing all this COVID-approved bullshit by setting up the tent, okay? And you, as the prole, and you as the underclasses, are gonna go sit in the tent and have your meal and appropriately mask up until you get to your table in the tent. But what happens to the inside of the restaurant? What happens to those beautiful structures that you're used to sitting at? Like, you know, maybe you want to go out for your anniversary and have a lovely meal and a white linen tablecloth and a wonderful, maybe 3 or 4 course meal and spend a little extra money. How are those gonna still operate? You know, you're sitting in your tent on the parking lot, out in the parking lot. Those are going to be reserved for the people that are actually instituting the fascism, instituting these anti-life initiatives. And they will have access to the inside of those restaurants, like for events or they will just buy up the restaurant for 10 or 12 of their colleagues for a night. And they'll, you know what I'm saying?
And that'll allow the restaurant to make its money back.
So a restaurant will be able to still make its money, or the hotel, or whatever it is, the event space.
And the reason that we bring this up is because we saw it. I mean, we're seeing
it.
But what we're seeing, the only place we're really seeing this happen is on the higher end restaurants are doing this, rather than, even though there's outdoor seating in a lot of these situations. We just went to a place last night that was essentially, just like a
cheap
taqueria.
Yeah.
Right?
It's fine.
And, sit down, it was a little better than just a taqueria.
Right,
it was,
right.
It was a Mexican restaurant.
Yeah.
And they did have outdoor seating, but they didn't have a tent out there. And it was their patio, not their...
right. And tables along the sidewalk,
right.
Which is what you would see anyway. But I guess what I'm trying to say... Sorry about that.
Sorry, just checking the controls. Sorry.
So I guess what I was trying to say is the reason that this is class war is the very people that are forcing you into, having your fine dining experience relegated to the parking lot in a stupid tent are the very people that are making money off of you through your COVID pass or through your mask initiatives or whatever, okay? But it's way more than that. And they are going to still have access to what you used to have access to. They're going to have access to it, but not you. So, and this will expand. This will expand into, suddenly you won't be able to drive or you won't be able to ride your bike on your favorite beautiful bike pathway anymore. It's going to be privatized. This is class war. This is class war. This is excoriating the middle class, excoriating, definitely wiping out the lower middle classes for sure, relegating them to the street. You can sit on the street. You can go sit on the curb over there, you peasant, you. Let me go sit inside my fine dining, beautiful establishment because I've made lots of money off of you.
Right. So this fits into the human capital investment that's going on as well, to where you're completely financialized and you will be treated like the chattel that you are.
Right. And so what we're doing is we're incorporating these experiences into, I'm an adult, you're an adult, like we're all experiencing it now, and we don't like it, but we're training the children right now in school that these kinds of experiences are normal, that this is a normal thing. And so these kids will grow up to be 20, 30 years old thinking that it's completely normal to sit in a parking lot and,
or deal with
eat a hamburger.
Or deal with the ritual of wearing a mask into the restaurant.
Right.
But once you sit down, you can take it off.
Right, and so I don't even think that...
Because that's bullshit. That doesn't, it doesn't make any sense. And there's a reason that it doesn't make any sense.
That's going away, though.
But it will go away, but that's training.
Yeah.
The reason they're asking you to do that is because it's training. It's a ritual.
Right.
It has nothing to do with health.
Eventually what they're going to say is, if you want to eat here, we have, the tent set up for you. And just keep your mask on until you sit in the table in the tent, and that's that's going to be normal.
Right.
And you will never be able to go inside the restaurant and sit at the bar or experience the beautiful artwork or the beautiful table service or anything like that.
And if we're wrong about that, we'll be happy to eat crow for that. But
we're already seeing it.
We're already starting to see it.
We're already seeing the tents being set up. They're training us that we're nothing. And so my whole reaction to all of this,
unless you go to a prole restaurant, right?
Right.
Yeah.
My whole reaction to all of this, to all of it, is to just drop it. Just fucking drop that shit. You don't need to be treated like this. You're not human capital. You're not a prole. You don't deserve to sit in a fucking parking lot or on the street, breathing in gas fumes while you throw down $30 or $40 for a meal. You deserve something better. It's like, go to your friend's house, get a few have a better experience.
Well,
creating new experiences.
And so there's two systems that I would like, or two ideas that I would like to put out to kind of support that idea. Now, in the recent past, there have been a number of indie rock, indie pop type of performers and bands that have gone on tour doing what they call living room shows, okay? And so they'll set up, instead of going to venues, they will set up ahead of time a number of small shows in people's houses where only a small number of people come. They buy tickets, they go into that house, and they see a show from this performer. Well, they've already set up the show, so they know where they're going, they know where they're going to stay, they know all the things. It's cheaper for them to do as a tour, maybe a smaller tour. So now they have this network of places that they're going to be going to. People know about them, and everything's, taken care of. And they still have culture, they still have shows, and this is pre-COVID even. This is
right.
This is pre-COVID-19.
Right.
Okay, where these things are going on. Now, the other system that I'd like to is much older, and we saw a historical marker the other day that reminded me about this, and that's the Underground Railroad.
Mm-hmm.
During slave times in the 19th century, where escaped slaves had a network of people to go to as they went from one place to the next to go to say Canada, for instance, where
right.
they could live a life that's more free. Or
right.
they could go to the north where they could live a life where they weren't slaves any longer.
Right.
And so these were it wasn't all underground, but there were some underground tunnels for sure. But the point is that this was a network of people who worked with each other and had a communication system that was even before the telephone.
Right. If they could do it, so can we.
Right, exactly.
I mean,
so these are the things we need to start thinking about. If we can no longer travel and go to a motel and eat at a restaurant,
right,
we can still have the possibility of traveling and seeing each other and being with each other, to share ideas and to create this other parallel existence, another parallel society.
JP and I have already done it. Like, we've already had a friend who was starting to feel the sting of living in a COVID world. Come and stay with us.
Right.
Like, I mean, it's already happening. So this is the Underground Railroad that we're talking about. Like, this is what that is where it's like, you either you can if you want to do that, if you want to throw down $40 or $50 and go sit in a tent in a parking lot to have a meal because you're trying to hold on to the last remnants of a pre-COVID world, then by all means, it's your choice. I never stop saying that everybody has a choice in all this. You have a choice. But if you don't, then you're going to have to do like what he just talked about, how the slaves were given sanctuary in certain houses all across this country,
and it was a network.
It was a network, and
people worked together to make it happen.
Right. And sometimes the authorities knew about it and they just let it go. They didn't care. They had other things that they wanted to invest in. And I kind of feel like that's how it's going to work in this situation. It's like, ooh, what if I want to send you an email or a text message about coming over and, escaping all of this fucking tyranny and fascism, but won't they track my email and won't they track my text messages? Yeah, so what? They have bigger and better things to worry about than, whether you go to a friend's house for a few days and,
Right.
have a home-cooked meal and experience, a living room full of people that are watching a really cool movie or making music.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
And then,
they don't care about that.
right. Or they, or we find ways around that so that they don't find out.
Yeah.
So here's another, thing that I wanted to mention. It was sort of a coping mechanism, and I think we're coming up to our hour soon, so I'll just end with
we'll
this
wrap it
idea.
up.
In our experience this weekend, we did stay at a motel, okay? But we had a choice between a really cool, hip kind of, trendy kind of experience or a more bland corporate experience. And we ended up going with the more bland corporate experience because what we found is when we talked to or looked at the marketing of each place, so we talked to the people at the one that we ended up staying in because we had some questions about it, they were really pretty casual about stuff and saying, like, well, this is no longer available, but this other thing is available, and we open it and you can go in and whatever, right? And we found that to be the case. We're going through another tunnel, so the light will
dark.
change.
Yeah.
That they were really, we'd walk into the lobby without our masks on, and they didn't really say anything about it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whereas we felt like the other experience that was, the cool hip one, where people would go to, it just felt like it was going to be
really
mask, and all mask.
Really fashy.
And really fashy.
Fascism, just ugh.
Yeah.
So we'd much prefer to go to the bland, cheap. I mean, they were both cheap. It was we had credit, okay, so we could use these things. We're struggling financially, so we're taking advantage of certain credits and things that we have accumulated over the years. Okay, so that explains that. And plus it's my birthday and I wanted to do something. I wanted to see like Amish country and also get an idea of how other societies operate within this complete and total corporate fascist takeover. And the Amish, for all their weirdness and issues, the Amish are a good example of how they literally exist within this society.
So you have collective autonomy, and you have collectivism that isn't what people are afraid of.
Right.
Like people are afraid of communism because of its collectivism, or or the opposite. They're afraid of collectivism because of communism, and being told what to do and giving up your individual rights.
Right.
But if you look at the Amish, that's a good example. Even though they have a religion that kind of holds them all together, they work collectively. But
they
the individuals, they also have their own individuality.
Right. And so what's interesting too is, all right, so going back to what JP said, so the more boutique-y, more like interesting one that would actually aesthetically it would have been more appropriate for us to stay there because of all the aesthetics, and it's centered around, it's like a music themed hotel and it's really hip. That's more us. But with all of that hipness and all of that COVID money that I'm sure they got, comes that degree of control and complete and total fascism. I would not even be surprised if, as they give you your room key, you also get like a mask with their hotel
logo mask,
logo emblazoned on the front. Like, that's how bad it is. So the place we decided to go to was, not that super fancy, whatever, but we got left alone. We weren't told that we had to mask up in the hallways or, near the front desk, and they talked to us when we weren't wearing our mask, and they were young and just earning a living and didn't give a shit. Right.
So sometimes you can use the massive corporate entity against itself and to your advantage.
Right.
And so in that case, it was bland and boring and corporate, but it also had a bunch of kids that were working for the corporation who didn't give a shit and didn't have to answer to too much bullshit. They were fairly left alone, I imagine, and so we were.
But back to the Amish. So what was really interesting too was this intersection between, okay, so you're like driving along this really busy road with all sorts of corporate bullshit around it. You've got a Target, you've got Burger King, McDonald's, Starbucks, Walmart, grocery stores, big parking lots for all these places, fast road. But on the side of it, you've also got the horse and buggy, the Amish horse and buggy that are trotting along doing their thing. So they are existing within the society that would seemingly, like it seemed to have overtaken their world. But they're still existing within that society without losing their sense of themselves or their autonomy.
And what was weird is the fact that they exist at all, that they were there in that spot, and they were conducting their lives as they see fit, their horse and buggies along the main road. The tourism in that specific area was a result of those very people.
Right.
So even though there was a lack of accommodation for them in their life and the way that they live, that commerce and all that tourism that existed and all the glitzy shit was a result of those very people who are living a completely different lifestyle than the people visiting the area, which is just so fucked up and weird.
It's weird. It was weird, but it was really cool to see them still operating their own lives and existing within these like really oppressive systems that they do not accept and they do not partake in. So
and I think that's how we're going to end up seeing our alternative society.
Right. So the alternative society we're talking about is not necessarily like a complete and total rejection of this, these anti-life scenarios. Okay, so another thing I noticed too.
We'll be living parallel in the
We'll be living parallel and sometimes circulating back in and out. But so one thing else that I noticed was that when we stopped off at the roadside stand to get like a little cup of cider for $1, and they had, it was a little farmer's market kind of thing where you could go in and get organic vegetables and eggs and things like that, and they had a huge pumpkin patch and the whole thing. It's not like they're so dedicated to their own lifestyle that they refuse to sell their goods to the outside world. There were plenty of people driving up in their cars wearing masks, plenty of people of the managerial class, because they had BMWs and stuff, driving into Amish territory wearing a mask and buying from the Amish, whereas the Amish did not have masks on. They had their, horse and buggies parked right there, next to the parking lot.
Because there were Amish folks shopping there as well.
And there were Amish folks. So you had a mingling of the two, societies intersecting. So that's what we're talking about. Like, we could really learn a lot from that. That trade, the way that they behave with each other and still operate.
That coexistence of the two societies.
Coexistence, thank you.
Yeah.
Coexistence. So we're going to have to really start thinking about these things. We are, we're really we're not going to stop talking about it. That's our deal. Being, autonomous individuals who believe in true collectivism, not the co-optation of your autonomy into corporate collectivism. That's different.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're at the hour mark, so we're gonna stop. Okay. And we hope you've enjoyed the car ride with us.
It's an interesting car ride. We've been seeing a lot of pretty sights, but also a lot of just weird political stuff too.
Yeah. But so we'll just keep in mind that the whole thing with Trump being diagnosed with COVID-19 and then forced to quarantine for 2 weeks, this is a way to rally his base, because he didn't do so well, I guess, in the debate with Biden.
At least that's what they said.
Yeah. He acted really immature. He threw like a temper tantrum or something. I don't know. I didn't watch it. I don't know. This is all hearsay and stuff I've heard. So he's he's getting his base back to wanting to vote for him.
Well, and I think you looked at it as the October surprise you were predicting.
Yeah. So there you go. And
right.
I'm sure we will be having many more October surprises.
Yeah, given the
Yep.
situation we're in. Yep.
Yeah. Thanks for joining today, and we will check you later.
All right, see ya.
Bye. Book of Hours is determined to remain an essential platform that offers a creative interpretation for lockdown skeptics and experts who have been censored by mainstream press. Thanks to your donations, we can carry on doing this essential work as working artists. These big issues of the day are vital and need to be heard. So please share our videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel, make a one-time donation on our PayPal page, but most importantly, please be a part of our team on our Patreon page. Go to patreon.com/bookofhours and hit the blue button titled Become a Patron. Thank you.